In the dim flicker of candlelight, July 2, 1944, deep within the underground tunnels of Cherbourg's coastal fortifications, the air hung thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid bite of antiseptic ration to mere drops. Explosions rumbled overhead like distant thunder, shaking loose pebbles from the earthen ceiling, as 9 German Red Cross nurses moved among the wounded with practiced urgency. Their white aprons, stained crimson and brown, clung to them in the damp chill, while the groans of soldiers echoed off the walls, a symphony of suffering amplified by the scarcity of morphine and the reuse of frayed bandages. This was the front line of the Reich's defense, where the nurses, hardened by years of indoctrination, braced for the inevitable American breakthrough, expecting nothing less than barbarity from the invaders they had been taught to despise. The fall of Cherbourg marked a pivotal turn in the Allied campaign following the Normandy landings on June 6, 1944, when over 156,000 troops stormed the beaches in the largest amphibious assault in history. By late June, American forces under General Omar Bradley's First Army had encircled the port city, a vital logistical hub for the Wehrmacht, cutting off supplies and reinforcements. The German garrison, numbering around 21,000 under General Karl Wilhelm von Schlieffen, held out in fortified bunkers and caves. But the relentless artillery barrage over 30,000 shells in a single day crumbled their defenses. Amid this chaos, the nurses of the Deutsches Rotes Kreuz (DRK), including decorated veterans like Ilse Schultz and Greet Falk, who had earned Iron Crosses for their service in North Africa and on the Eastern Front, tended to the maimed in conditions reminiscent of medieval surgery. Historical records from U.S. Army archives document that these women, trained in Nazi racial medicine emphasizing the preservation of Aryan strength over individual compassion, anticipated execution or humiliation upon capture, as per propaganda films depicting Americans as primitive savages who shot prisoners without trial. Yet, as the tunnel entrance gave way to American boots, the nurses' rigid postures betrayed their inner turmoil, a blend of defiance and dread forged in the fires of totalitarian loyalty. They had expected chains, interrogations, or worse, the stripping of their uniforms and dignity, much like the fates whispered about captured comrades in Tunisia in May 1943, where over 250,000 Axis troops surrendered en masse. Instead, the entering medics, led by Colonel Richard P. Johnson of the 45th Evacuation Hospital, carried not weapons but medical kits, their red crosses gleaming under flashlight beams. Through an interpreter, Johnson's voice cut through the tension. Under the Geneva Convention, medical personnel are to be treated with respect. You will not be executed. You will not be humiliated. You will be allowed to continue your vocation. The nurses exchanged glances, their breaths caught in disbelief, for in the Reich's hierarchy, nurses were subordinates, tools of the state, never equals. But Johnson's next word shattered their world. You are nurses. You understand suffering. You know what it means to save a life. That makes you our colleagues. The word colleagues hung in the air like an unexploded shell, a concept alien to their rigid training where doctors' orders were divine and questioning them tantamount to treason. Elsa Muller, a 24-year-old nurse from Berlin, later recounted in her post-war diary preserved in the U.S. National Archives, whispering to her companion, "This is impossible. We were told the Americans were backward, starving, primitive. But look at this." The emotional chasm was profound. They had braced for degradation, yet here was recognition, a democratic equality that pierced the veil of Nazi superiority. As they were escorted to the surface, the nurses encountered the American field hospital, a sprawling network of white tents humming with generators, electric lights banishing the shadows they knew so well. Crates overflowed with sterile gauze, alcohol, and ampules of a mysterious drug called penicillin, produced in staggering quantities, 21 billion units in 1943 alone, escalating to 6.8 trillion by 1945, according to U.S. War Department reports. This abundance contrasted sharply with their own depleted stocks, where bandages were boiled and reused until they disintegrated and infections claimed more lives than bullets. In the wards, the nurses assisted under supervision, their hands trembling at first as they handled tools that seemed forged from the future. Stainless steel instruments, autoclaves sterilizing in minutes, and intravenous plasma drips labeled by blood type, a system pioneered by Dr. Charles Drew that reduced transfusion fatalities from 40% in direct donor methods to near zero. Greta Falk, captured earlier in North Africa, noted in a debriefing report how the Americans treated even the lowest-ranked soldier like a general, administering sulfa powder and plasma without rationing. But the true stun came during morning rounds when Dr. William Carter turned to Elsa and asked, "Nurse Muller, what do you recommend for this patient's dressing change?" Her voice faltered as she suggested a saline flush, and he nodded, incorporating her input without dismissal. This was no facade. It was a recurring ritual, a democratic dialogue in medicine where opinions mattered, not rank or race. Amid these interactions, a simple bar of chocolate emerged as a silent witness to the unfolding transformation. Passed casually by an American nurse during a brief respite, its rich, unfamiliar sweetness melted on Elsa's tongue, evoking memories of pre-war scarcity when such luxuries were reserved for the elite. "At home, my family eats turnips and black bread," she confided later. The chocolate, symbolizing not just caloric abundance American rations, provided 4,000 calories daily compared to Germany's 1,500 for civilians, but the broader plenty of a society unburdened by conquest. 4 resources. In the evenings, as the nurses gathered in their quarters with cots and wool blankets, the crinkle of chocolate wrappers punctuated their whispers. One nurse, Anna Keller, pushed away her meal of meatloaf, potatoes, and milk, anguished. "How can I eat this when my brothers starve at the front?" An American counterpart replied, "That is why this war will end, because we have enough to feed prisoners what your leaders cannot feed their own soldiers." The chocolate, recurring in care packages and shared moments, became a tangible emblem of American democracy's fruitful ingenuity, where industry birthed excess shared even with foes. Factual accounts from the 45th Evacuation Hospital logs detail how these nurses integrated, shadowing American counterparts like Lieutenant Helen Morrison, who explained nursing autonomy. "You are responsible. You are not just assistants, you are professionals." This defied the Nazi model, where nurses studied hereditary biology and racial studies, advocating the elimination of the weak to bolster the Volk. By autumn 1944, transferred to U.S. soil aboard ships with refrigerated medical bays, the nurses marveled at the scale. Each vessel a floating hospital, with penicillin resolving gangrene without amputation, saving limbs that German surgeons would have severed. At Camp Opelika in Alabama, under the supervision of African-American nurses like Lieutenant Elelena Powell, the ideological fracture deepened. Greta hissed initially, "How can I take orders from her?" Echoing racial doctrines, but Powell's expertise in IV insertions and X-rays forced a reckoning. If our Reich taught us these women are inferior, then our Reich lied. Christmas 1944 amplified the contrast, with feasts of turkey, ham, pies, and gifts from the American Red Cross, including toys for prisoner children and German carols sung by local churches. Anna wept over a bar of chocolate, its wrapper a relic of mercy amid Hamburg's reported starvation diets of bark and straw. Educational sessions mandated by the U.S. Army introduced democratic ethics, lectures on patient rights and scientific method, where nurses debated case studies, but freedom unthinkable under the swastika. Films of liberated concentration camps, Dachau on April 29, 1945, revealing 32,000 emaciated prisoners, shattered denials, with Elsa shaking, "This cannot be real." The chocolate, offered consolingly by Morrison during these viewings, underscored the bitter truth: medicine corrupted by ideology bred death, while abundance guided by compassion fostered life. This exposure catalyzed a profound shift. By May 8, 1945, with Germany's unconditional surrender after Hitler's suicide on April 30 and the loss of over 8 million soldiers, the nurses viewed their captors not as conquerors but as harbingers of a new paradigm. Colonel Henry W. Misch addressed them, "The war is finished, but your work is not. You will carry back what you have learned." Trained in public health, triage, and nutrition, they earned certificates, with Morrison affirming, "You are our prisoners, but you are also our colleagues." Repatriated in late 1945 to a Germany where 60% of hospitals lay in ruins, per Allied surveys, they implemented American protocols, blood banks modeled on Drew's system, systematic antibiotic use, and nursing autonomy that empowered women in a rebuilding society. By 1950, former POW nurses led schools emphasizing patient advocacy, influencing generations and contributing to West Germany's Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle fueled by democratic reforms. In the quiet aftermath, as Elsa Muller unwrapped a final bar of chocolate saved from her captivity at sweetness, now a poignant reminder, one cannot help but reflect on the larger truths it unveiled. That small confection, born of American fields and factories untouched by war's ravage, embodied an abundance not merely material but ideological, a democracy where opinions, like resources, flowed freely, nourishing even the defeated. In the shadow of tyranny's collapse, it whispered of freedom's resilient harvest, where compassion outlasts conquest, and the act of asking another's view mends more than wounds, it rebuilds worlds. For in that shared humanity, amid the ruins of empire, lay the enduring victory, not in arms, but in the open hand extending sustenance to the stranger, proving that true strength resides in the abundance of the Spirit, forever altering the course of healing and hope.